it back on because I'll forget. Bill didn't make it. Still there. Okay, YouTube's up. Huh. Wow.
Thank you for doing this. Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
I'll share. It's from my dad's bar mitzvah.
Nice.
No, but we threw a bunch of.
It's, we are live, so anyway,
Oh, right. Okay.
everything is. And even Facebook, it came up. So
Okay.
good. So what do you need? Testing, testing, good. Okay.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. I'll just do it.
Yes. They're supposed to be two.
And maybe one.
One is going to be inside.
Okay.
Yeah, I already talked to Sergeant know about it. And he's supposed to be here. Let me go check. I'll go check.
Yeah. People around that.
No, no. Oh, I don't do the wrong ways. Yeah. That's right.
Perfect. Yeah. And then on the other side. He's got it. There you go. Yeah. Moving around.
The results from the
Yeah. I'll get another one of these.
No.
We will put this right on the keyboard. If you don't, just don't move it around. Because it's right on the keyboard. Mhm. In fact, you know what? I have a better solution. Let's put this here. Yep. Sure. You can sing this one. That's easy. It's cut there. This is just phonetic. Five. Interesting, they're all.
Is that right?
Excuse me. This is a good look. Unless you want to, if you want a closer up cam. See, this is closer up. And this is kind of farther away. So it's better. Like to welcome everyone. Welcome to Agudath, Israel. It's Ahayem Synagogue. I am Rabbi Scott Kramer. We are here today to not only mourn for Stefan Ensler, but to give comfort to his family. Phil Ensler is a member of this congregation, and we come together as a community at these difficult times in our lives to show support for Phil and for everyone that has experienced loss. In Judaism, it is the custom to bury our dead as soon as possible after death. In large Jewish communities, this will occur within 24 hours. For those that live in more remote areas, a bit longer is needed. The reason for doing this is to let the family begin the process of mourning, which cannot occur until after the funeral. There is a concept of kavod hamet, or Ahayem, respect for the dead and for the living. We give respect to the dead by properly preparing them for burial, by a ritual bathing, by a dedicated group of men and women called the Chevra Kadisha, the Holy Brotherhood or Holy Sisterhood. Everyone is buried in traditional white shrouds and placed in an all-wooden casket, along with their talit or prayer shawl that they wore during religious services. The family places earth on the coffin as the last act of physically coming into contact with their loved one. We also give respect to the living by helping those grieving in very concrete ways. Those mourning return home after interment for the traditional 7-day period of mourning called Shiva. Once home, the community provides meals and helps the family with their grief by holding services in the home and just being there to support them. During Shiva, the family stays away from work and remains in the home while being comforted by their community. After Shiva, the next period of mourning is called Shloshim, a 30-day period where those mourning slowly re-enter the world by leaving the home, getting back to work, while still attending religious services on a daily basis to say prayers in memory of their beloved. Phil Ensler has completed Shiva and Shloshim and enters a further 10-month period of mourning till the first anniversary of the death of his father, after which he will observe Yahrzeit, a yearly remembrance of his father. Since Phil's father died and was buried out of town, we decided to provide this memorial service so the Jewish community of Montgomery and Phil's friends and acquaintances would have an opportunity to express their support for his loss. I will now call up Toria Stark, who will offer the traditional prayer for mourning, the El Malay Rachamim, after which Bill will offer some reflections.
El Malay Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Amtsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Chanfei HaShechina, B'ma'alot kedoshim u'tehurim, Kizdohar harakia, Mazirim. Et nishmat Shlomo Tzvi ben Avraham, שהלך לעולמו. בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. אנא בעל הרחמים, יסתירהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים. ויצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו. וינוח בשלום על משכבו. ונאמר אמן.
Rabbi Kramer and Pastor West, thank you for helping lead this special and meaningful service. To Taria, Miriam, David, Quatasia, Nick, and Dietrich, Thank you for offering your soulful voices and musical skills. To some of our distinguished guests, Father Williams, Pastor Nettles, Judges Gaines, I said that correctly, and to friends, community members, colleagues in attendance, thank you for showing up and for all of your love and support, not just through the good times, but the challenging ones. This service is a unique one in that we put it together for some of the prayers and reflections that are traditional for Jewish mourning, but also with a little bit of a personal flavor and taste that will be tunes that are familiar to everyone, and we'll have a combination of some in Hebrew, some in English, and then, of course, one prayer, the Mourner's Kaddish, in the traditional Aramaic. To those tuning in virtually, especially my mom and sister, I love you, and you are here in spirit. As many of you know by now, my dad, Stefan, was born, raised, and still living on the Upper East Side of New York City, and had surgery for 2 aneurysms in his abdomen in early May. While that surgery was relatively successful, it led to numerous severe complications, and after a few weeks in the ICU of being on a ventilator and fighting a septic infection, kidney failure, and much more, his body entered eternal rest. He was 73 years old. As I've shared with many of you, I find tremendous comfort in knowing that I was with him in New York the night before the surgery and enjoyed chicken parmesan from our favorite neighborhood Italian restaurant. I then spent the next 2 weeks back and forth between here and New York, and again find tremendous comfort in knowing that I was by his bedside in his final hour of life. As Rabbi Kramer said, in accordance with Jewish custom of burying as quickly as possible, we then had his graveside funeral 2 days after his passing. I spent the 30 days of the Shloshim, the Jewish period of initial mourning, in his apartment to feel his presence and be fully present with my grief and this new, surreal, harsh reality. It is now a source of immense comfort to be surrounded and uplifted by so many of you here in Montgomery. This past week, I had several routine doctor appointments, and each time I was doing the check-in paperwork and got to the part in which you were asked to list an emergency contact, I paused. For the first time in my life, I could not list my dad. I share this not to highlight my sadness, but to highlight who he was, to share with you the kind of person he was, that he was deeply reliable, who could be there for me, not just when it was convenient, but when there was a need. And I needed someone to just show up, help fix a situation, or get the job done. In that sense, he was often who you wanted to call on in an emergency. I'm grateful that I have my twin sister, Caroline, and my mom, who I can also and continue to call on in emergencies. Biographically, my dad's family is from the Russia area. His great-grandparents emigrated to the United States in the late 1800s. Historically, that was a time in which Jews lived under constant terror of pogroms, violent attacks on their communities, so they sought refuge in America. My great-grandfather went on to start his own business in the garment industry and own several of his own successful businesses. My dad's father, though, was an absentee parent. He was not much of at all a presence in his life, leaving it to my grandma to raise him. Although my dad never spoke about it, I came to believe that he wanted to be the antithesis, the complete opposite of his dad. While his father was not present, my dad was omnipresent, constantly there. While his dad was not dependable, my dad would always show up and could be counted on. He was not perfect, as none of us are. The ride could be bumpy at times when his temper got the best of him, but the reliable, constant moments are what stick with me the most. In high school, through my spiritual growth at Jewish summer camp and the mentorship of my social justice-minded history teacher, I developed a deep awareness of how fortunate I was compared to many others, and that it was a privilege to be born to such a hands-on, generous father. This motivated me to pursue a life of serving others and help try to even the playing field. So in my senior year of college in Washington, D.C., rather than just follow a more conventional path of going to law school in the Northeast or taking a job in national politics, I applied for the program Teach for America. Drawing from the civil rights history I was taught in high school, which led me to briefly visit Montgomery in college, I wanted to be here, in the birthplace of the civil rights movement. This decision to move to Montgomery to teach at Lee High School, rather than remain in the comfortable and ambitious arenas of DC or New York, led to the biggest clash my dad and I ever had. He felt that I was abandoning the career path that I had started to chart out, interning for the governor of New York during summers and then the Obama White House during the school year. His visceral, instinctual protectiveness kicked in. The worst of his personality traits, yelling, screaming, and anger, kicked in. It got so bad that he threatened to disown me if I moved to Montgomery. Even though he did not articulate it in this way, I believe that his concern was that I would be out of his more immediate orbit, outside of a realm in which he could protect me. See, my dad was 14 years old in 1964 when Andrew Goodman, Michael Schwerner, and James Chaney were murdered by the KKK in Philadelphia, Mississippi, for registering Black residents to vote during Freedom Summer. Goodman and Schwerner were both Jews from New York who in their 20s joined the Congress for Racial Equality and teamed up with Chaney, a Black civil rights worker in Mississippi. So to my dad, from his perspective, in his bubble on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, the Deep South was maybe still a place where young Jewish guys from New York who come to join the fight for equality and freedom would not be very welcome. While my dad's reaction to my decision to move here was incredibly distressing, I came to understand why he opposed it. And perhaps most of all, his deepest fear was that by being far away, I would no longer need him as much and it would diminish his hands-on role in so much of my life. I expressed to him that like everything in my life, my time and experience in Montgomery would be better with his support and involvement. I assured him I would only be here for 2 years and then resume the path of law and government in DC or New York. He gave up his vehement protests and started to do what he did best, show up for me. When I reported to rural Mississippi for Teach for America summer training, my dad flew from New York to my grandma's house in Palm Beach, Florida, soaked up some sun, which he loved, and then drove my grandma's car to me in Mississippi so I would have a car for the summer and then for my move from there to Montgomery. When he arrived, his heavy beach tan, his distinct New York accent, and the Palm Beach license plates made him seem like an alien in a foreign place. As was often the case, I was simultaneously worried that he would embarrass me by making an inappropriate joke to my friends or in public, yet I was also grateful that he was there, and I was aware of how fortunate I was to have him support me in that way. He then took a Greyhound bus from Cleveland, Mississippi to the biggest main airport several hours away in Memphis, Tennessee, to fly back to New York. This type of effort was not unique for my dad, it was the norm. I can spend hours telling you similar stories about times he went above and beyond to ensure I had everything that I wanted and needed and more. As I then got underway with the school year at Lee and got more acclimated here, my dad started to become more comfortable with me in Montgomery. He knew that people like Amy and Neil, who I think he saw a kindred spirit in telling corny dad jokes, and people like Pastor West, who at the time worked at Lee and became my Montgomery mother, and of course, Mr. Leroy Barrow, who became like an older brother, my dad started to realize that between the Lee high school community and the Jewish community, that I wasn't alone here, that he didn't have to worry as much. I kept my word to him, though, and after 2 years of teaching, I moved back to New York for law school. As many of you know, though, my heart was still here. My students, families, and teachers at Lee had a profound impact on me, and this community became my home. After 3 years of law school, I knew I was supposed to be back here, in the community that embraced me and I felt most connected to. So this time, rather than fight me on it, my dad helped me pack up my apartment, load up our cars, and drive down for my move back here. And as I say, the rest is history. So many of you here came to meet my dad during his visits over the last few years, and especially during the campaigns when he worked tirelessly to help with the least glamorous but essential tasks of putting together yard signs, folding t-shirts, waving signs at major intersections, and stocking up on waters and food for Election Day workers. I'm so grateful that for so many of you, your best memory of him here was him beaming, bursting with joy over my election in November. The last thing he ever asked me when lying in his hospital bed, just informed by the doctors that he had a blood clot and would need to go back into surgery, was for my new business card from the state legislature. He was so proud and found so much joy in it that he wanted to hold on to a memento of our accomplishment. Even at the very end, he was more focused on me than himself. When the funeral home asked me after his passing what his job occupation was, to list it as required on death certificates in New York, I hesitated. Not because my dad did not have occupations. He mostly worked in real estate and then as a consultant in telecommunications. His proudest accomplishment and title, though, was dad. He worked hardest and put in the most hours when it came to me and my sister. I seriously asked the funeral home if his occupation could be listed as super dad, to which the funeral home said they wish, but that is not a formally recognized profession in New York, and I decided not to fight them on that. As a super dad, I have endless memories of him showing up, of being present, of giving his all, and often having more energy than I did. When I think of him at the end of a long day of helping me move furniture up and down apartment buildings during my moves back and forth, sweating profusely in the humidity here as he ran campaign tasks, always a vigorous, lively personality that showed up to be an extra set of hands. More than giving money or gifts or words of support, he gave the most precious commodity of all, his time. And no matter how busy I was in college, law school, internships, jobs, we always made the time over many years to take an annual trip to Tampa to see the New York Yankees in spring training. That was some of the best quality father-son time we had. My dad and I would talk every day, usually first thing on my way to whatever internship or job I had, whether it was during my morning walk to the White House in DC, or on the commute to Lee High School, or most recently on my short drive to the State House. We would speak for a few minutes and talk about the day ahead. We always ended the call by saying, "I love you." My dad was constantly telling jokes, and as previously mentioned, he loved relaxing at the beach. So during many of our calls, when talking about the more serious current events of the day, we had a way of easing some of that heaviness by joking that I would try to get the government to create a role for him called Secretary of Beaches. So he could spend his time flying around the world to check out and report back to me on the beautiful water, sand, and sunshine. I'll wrap up by sharing this, that the last line of Adon Olam, the song that we'll conclude with, roughly translates to, "When I sleep as when I wake, God is with me, I shall not fear." Each day when I wake up, the first thing I do is say that line to myself in my head as motivation for the day. Since my dad's passing, I now add in that God and my dad are with me. It is daunting to think about continuing to live without his physical presence and without our daily phone calls. But I know that for the rest of my life, he is with me. Through the love, support, knowledge, skills, talents that he modeled and provided, and the endless memories, jokes, and stories, which now you all will have to hear from me. I have a deep reservoir of inspiration and love from him to turn to and draw from. He was always there, and he always will be. May his memory be for a blessing.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Jesus gave it to me. I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, Jesus gave it to me. And I'm gonna let it shine. Jesus gave it to me. So I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, Lord, I'm gonna let it shine, 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 ooh, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine.
Good afternoon, everyone. Phil, I was touched when you asked me to speak about Stefan today. He and I hit it off the first time we met. That may surprise you, me being a slow-talking Southerner and he being a quick, worldly Northerner. But I learned your dad was as warm and caring as any Southern gentleman I ever knew. I was always amazed how many times he came to visit you to help you move to and from Montgomery. And those visits really ramped up when you ran for the legislature. He was by your side so many times, helping with the campaign. He was proud of your life, centered on Tikkun Olam, and confident you will make this world a better place. On one of those visits, I told Stefan this will be a tough race. The incumbent has lived in Montgomery all her life. He has many years of gathering supporters and making connections. Your dad didn't miss a beat, didn't see any problem, and he said, Phil will outwork her. And that's exactly what you did. This was just how much confidence he had in you. I know you had a wonderful relationship with your dad, and you miss him very much. You are smart and strong. I know you will continue to make him proud, to live your life in all the ways that he taught you.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, bin oste sheyar bitzedi, al mei menuchot, Yenaleini.
Nafshi yeshoveh, yeshoveh, yancheini b'magalei tzedek, yancheini b'magalei tzedek, le'ma'an shemo.
Gam kelech begitz al movet lo ira, ki ata imadi shivtecha u'mitzvottecha
Ta'aroch lefanai, shulchan neged zorai.
Shanta Vashem Roshi Kosi Revaya
Aktov v'chesed yirfuni kol yemei chayai, kol yemei chayai. V'shavti bevet Adonai
Yamim.
Adonai roi lo echsar.
Adonai roi
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guided me in the straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen.
Precious Lord, take my hand and lead me on. Let me stand. I am tired. I am weak. I am worn through the storm, through the night. Lead me on to the light. Precious Lord, take my hand and lead me home. When my way grows straight, precious Lord, linger near. When my life is almost gone. Hear my cry, my call. Hold my hand, lest I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home, precious Lord, take my hand and lead me on. Let me stand. I am tired. I am weak. I am worn. At the river me home.
When Jews mourn their loved ones, we say a special prayer called the Mourner's Kaddish. This prayer is in Aramaic, the ancient language of the Jewish people. The custom for mourners is to recite Kaddish began after the 11th century. Though its origin is obscure, it has become an essential element of Jewish prayer. The Kaddish is not a private prayer. Rather, it is recited in community with a minyan or quorum of 10 adult Jews present. In that context, the mourner affirms that tragedy has not separated him or her from God or the Jewish people, and in turn, the communal response then constitutes an acknowledgement of the mourner. I ask those who observing yahrzeit or in mourning to rise now with Phil to recite the words of the Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish.
Yikadal, Yikadah Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Amad Virte, Amlik Malhute, Ahayon, Ivomehon, Uvhaye Dekol Be Israel, Baglavis Mankri Vimru, Amen. Yeheshme Rabba Merach, Lelamo Meo Maya, Yibarak, Vishtabak, Vipar, Ramamit Nase, Vitadar, Vitalal, Shmei Yusha, Brehu, Leila, Minkol Behirata, Vashirata, Tushbahata, Hamata, Damira, Balma, Vimru, Amen. Yehesh Lama Rama Mishamaya, Ahayem Aleinu Ve'okol Yisrael, Vimru, Amen. Oseshe Shalom B'Mirav, Uyase Shalom, Aleinu Ve'okol Yisrael, Vimru, Amen.
Amen.
May be seated.
And we sing together the last 3 lines, Oseh Shalom, a prayer for peace. Oseh Shalom Bimrama, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru, Imru, Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael.
Good evening. I would like to begin my reflections by thanking Rabbi Kramer for affording me an opportunity to share moments of reflection regarding the life of Stefan Ensler. To Philip and Caroline and all of the extended family members, I am deeply sorry for the immeasurable amount of pain this great loss has caused. Philip, it is evident by the number of attendees today that Stefan, your father, was loved and respected by the City of Dreams community. When I learned of Stefan's transitioning, my thoughts immediately traveled back to the many conversations that transpired between the two of us. As I reflected on past conversations, I can honestly say that Stefan's thought process regarding the South and Philip's love for Montgomery, Alabama, changed tremendously over the years. As many of you know, Philip's journey in Montgomery, Alabama began with Teach for America. By God's design, Philip was assigned to Robert E. Lee High School as a teacher. It was at that time that several others and I decided that we, along with Mr. Barrow, we had to watch over Philip. We knew that without the grace of God and a strong support system, Philip would not survive Robert E. Lee High School. It would be over for him. I think it's safe to say that his father felt the same way. After navigating through a semester or two at Robert E. Lee High School, Philip came into my office and he said to me, he said, "Mom, I'm going to invite my dad to come to Lee." And I asked him, "Are you crazy?" He said, "I'm going to invite him to come," and to make matters worse, he was inviting him to come in the middle of the school day during what we had deemed fight season. I was very hesitant and reluctant for his father to come because I knew that his father would haul him back off to New York. I was very hesitant. I thought that after attending a school with so many dynamics, that Philip's father would not understand his assignment in Montgomery. Philip decided that he would go against my wishes and he would bring his father to the school. So Philip took off that day, and as he was traveling from home to the school, he would text me and say, "We're 10 minutes out." And I thought, oh God. And then he would send another text, "We're 5 minutes out." And I thought to myself, this is going to be an epic fail, and nothing good could come out of this. Philip then sent a text message and he said, "We're in the parking lot." And I knew that I could not stop him at this point. As Philip walked in the office with his father was not happy at all. I perceived him to be a man of few words, very stern and blunt, and there was not a smile on his face. But after meeting him on numerous occasions and engaging in lengthy conversations, those previous thoughts that I had constructed about him changed. He was a man of many words. He was kind, he was generous, and a very approachable man. He was always seeking a deeper understanding of Philip's love for Montgomery and his assignment in Montgomery. He wanted to know more about the people of Montgomery. And what he certainly desired the most was to be present in every aspect of Philip and Caroline's life. And in our last lengthy conversation, Stefan came to my office at the church to bring a t-shirt and some election push cards. He came 45 minutes, unlike Philip, who is always late, he was early. He came into the office and he sat. I was grateful that my message was already prepared and I had already prayed. He came into the office and he sat and he talked to me about his new appreciation for Montgomery. He was proud to serve as a campaign team manager. He knew the district lines. He knew most neighborhoods. And like Philip's mother and sister Caroline, he too had participated in neighborhood canvassing. He was excited. On a Sunday morning, I thought, I really need him in service today. He was excited. He was pumped. He was full of excitement. And he proudly stated to me, Pastor West, he can do this. I've watched the response of the people, he said. He said to me again, he can do this. A proud father he was, a humble soul, and a devoted man of faith. As I observed him at the election party, I observed a man who had found his place in an unfamiliar community. Throughout the night, I watched him as he engaged with Cuba Ray Hayes and all the women that were sitting at her table. He would go from table to table and he would talk to government officials and pastors, and his heart was filled with joy and he was happy. It was a joy that only God could give. It was a joy from previous times when I saw him and he looked as if he wanted to pack up Philip and move him back to New York. But this time, Father Manuel, there was something different about him. There was a joy, there was a glow. He was happy. And each time the results would come in from the precinct, he would run to the back and announce, he's ahead, he's ahead. He announced every time WSFA that they would make an announcement, he would repeat, he's ahead, Pastor, he's ahead, he's ahead. And I would say, he's ahead. He would run back and forth and he would talk to all the people, he would greet them. And oftentimes he would come back to the table to speak to me and I would ask him, who is that person? He had a name for each person. He knew where they worked, what they did, and how they were involved in Philip's life. He continued to announce all night the results. And when the largest precinct had come in, he ran to the back and he said, Pastor, come, come, come. Come, you have to see. He did it. He said, he did it. The people did it. We did it. And it was at that point that I knew that he had made peace with Philip being in Montgomery. It was at that point that I realized that he had subscribed to Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 through 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not to thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path. It was at that moment that I realized that he was turning it over to a higher power, someone bigger than him, God. He was okay with Philip being in Montgomery. And the next day, as he was sworn in by Judges Gaines, who are both here today, Philip was late, of course. I was the first one. Cheyenne Kreisberg and Andre were second. Rabbi Kramer came. He was there. The only person missing was Philip. His mom and sister was there, and then his father came, and he came over and greeted me, and I said, where's Philip? He said, I don't know. He's somewhere. He's coming. And I asked him, I said, are you happy? He said, I am more than happy. I am elated. I am so proud of my son, and we did it. And I said to him, I made you a promise, you and Philip's mom, years ago, that I would be his Montgomery mother, and I would take care of him. And I've stood true to that to this day. So I say to you, Philip, that God gave you a gift in your father. Cherish the moments, be present, and know that he's always with you. Thank you, and God bless you.
Sing with us? You want to join us to sing? Just join us. Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra leit nasa v'chefso kol adayin elef shemo nikra v'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora v'hu והוא עובר, והוא יהיה בתפארה, והוא אחד ואין שני, להמשילו, להכבירה, בלי ראשית, בלי תכלית, ולא העוז והמזרע, והוא אלי וחי גואלי, וצור חבלי בעת צרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי ביום אקרא בידו, אף כדרוכי, ותישן בעירה, וירוכי גביעתי, אדוני לי ולא ירא.
Thank you all for attending today's memorial service in support of Phil and his family. I would like to thank Toria Stark, Miriam Wyman, David Peden, Pastor Tonda West, and your lovely choir and instrumentation, and to Neil Leibovitz for his words of reflection. To Phil, I offer these traditional words of comfort. Hamakom yenachem etchem b'toch she'avele Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May God comfort you and all who have mourned for Zion and Jerusalem. I'd like to ask everyone to remain in your places as Phil will exit the room and be available for you to greet him in the foyer. Thank you.